Hello again and welcome, my dear friends. I'm Ryan Campbell. I'm your host for the conversation. I'm here joined with a very special guest, Darin Grossi. You are the Executive Director for Tuolumne County Transportation Council and also the Tuolumne County Transit Agency. Those are two entities that deal with everything related to road projects, to hiking and biking trails, and then also the bus system and all these different things in the community. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a great role I have in the community, planning all modes of transportation under the board that I have.
Yeah. And can you tell me, just for somebody that's not familiar, how can you describe the role that TCTC and TCTA play in the community?
Sure. Well, we actually were founded in 1967 under a joint powers agreement between the city of Sonora and county of Tuolumne. We were previously named the Tuolumne County and Cities Area Planning Council. Our role in the community was to do long-range planning and then secure state and federal funds to advance projects and programs that benefit the community. We've been doing that ever since. I should mention that in 1972, we were designated as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency by the state of California for Tuolumne County, which our main role there is to develop a regional transportation plan. And from that plan, we look out about 20 years or so on what the needs are of the community. And then we identify the more immediate high priority projects and programs that should advance. And we go out and find state and federal funds, working with our partners, be it Caltrans, the county or the city, and sometimes other districts like Groveland Community Service District to build projects in the community. In that role, we've done big projects as big as East Sonora Bypass. That was kind of a project when I came to Tuolumne County in 1993. It was just in its infancy. We were able to advance it. We built stage 1, 2, 3, and the Peaceful Oak Interchange, all for about $130 million or so. But we also do really small projects. We've contributed to Dragoon Gulch trails, various walkways for safe routes to school. And then we've also do things like help build electric charger infrastructure for some of the newer cars that are coming into our community. That's the Transportation Council side of the house, which is governed by 2 representatives of the Board of Supervisors, 2 city council members, and a citizen at large. And then we have 3 different advisory committees that give input to everything we do. And then the other side of the house is the Tuolumne County Transit Agency, where we plan and fund and then oversee public transit services in Tuolumne County, which offers fixed route services, Dollar Ride, which is open to the public. And then we have other programs like the ski bus or our trip program, which I can get into all those things. But we serve roughly 300 rides a day on public transit. And it's an important safety net in the community.
Yeah. And you and I know each other. We've known each other a lot of years because just for full disclosure, I'm one of the board members that serves on TCTC and TCTA. And so I get to see, firsthand a lot of these great projects that you're working on.
Yeah, I think you got one of the best committees to sit on of all of them, frankly.
Oh, I think so. I'm
a little biased, though.
Not biased at all, though. So what do you think? So one of the things that I communicate with people in the community about is a lot of public works issues, potholes, that kind of thing. But that's not what you do, right? You don't fill potholes. You don't draw stripes on the ground. You're kind of more focused on, when it comes to transportation, the big picture ideas about road widening and where we put trails and this type of thing. Well, why is that separate? Why is that a separate entity and not under like public works or filling potholes?
Well,
why is that important?
There was a point where we worked out of the Public Works Department. Public Works is very focused on maintenance of the system. They get bridges replaced when they need to be replaced. They do all the brushing and They're very much involved in the land development process. They do that maintenance. And we support all those activities to the extent we possibly can. We do have various funding sources that we pass through to Public Works at the county as well as the city to facilitate those things. But at some point, you have to have an entity, and that's why we're the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, that looks beyond the jurisdiction of the county and the jurisdictional interest of the city of Sonora and other districts, and kind of looks at the greater good of what's needed in the community. I think in some ways we're an agency that Caltrans very much relies on in the state of California. We have a lot of connections to the California Transportation Commission, the California Transportation Agency, to help funnel project funding to projects of regional significance, like the East Sonora bypass. And now we've shifted our focus to Highway 49, and I think the community is going to see a tremendous amount of improvements on Highway 49 in the next 10 years.
Yeah, tell me about that. So what's the plan with Highway 49? I know that we've identified bottlenecks and places where there's traffic congestion and not enough park and ride, not enough ways for people to get through them quickly. What are some of the ways we can alleviate that?
Well, it's not just traffic congestion, because that was the old way of looking at things. Mm-hmm. The state now expects us to be much more dynamic in our planning process. Mm-hmm. And we have to be more dynamic to show the nexus between the needs of our community and the objectives of the state of California. The state is very much interested in public health. Mm-hmm. So we work with the health department now to identify areas with high rates of asthma and COPD that might benefit from more walking opportunities. The state is also very interested in making sure that we have adequate bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So folks that choose to have an alternative mode of transportation have safe ways of doing that. As everybody knows, we've had a number of pedestrians hit or killed on Highway 49 in the Jamestown, Sonora, Columbia corridor. The state would like to provide them a safe facility. We're proposing what we call the Gold Rush Path, which is a separate pathway from the highway, separated for safety reasons, that will allow people to have a nice path adjacent to the highway, but it might meander off into some nice, beautiful areas along creeks, Woods Creek and whatnot. It'll provide a nice facility for those people, extending all the way, ultimately about 15 miles from Chicken Ranch up through Jamestown, along Woods Creek, up through Sonora, along Rotary Park, connecting with Dragoon Gulch, connecting with Sonora High School, and then ultimately all the way into the Columbia State Park and Columbia College. That project has tremendous momentum right now. Mm-hmm. And we've actually gotten already about $5.5 million in funding. And Caltrans is incorporating it into a major project they're doing on Highway 49. They're going to be doing a highway project. And initially, it was about a $6.5 million job to pave the highway all the way from Chicken Ranch to the north side of Sonora up by the Arco station. I think it's LC Way. Mm-hmm. We talked to them about the needs on the highway, engaged the Public Works Director, Kim McFarland, and the city manager, Melissa Eads, to help with the conversation about what our needs are. And the state recognized the safety needs. They're going to add in that separate bicycle pedestrian path into their project. We talked about all the people that park at the Whistle Stop in Jamestown, that then commute to the valley. They've added a park and ride facility in the Jamestown area. We haven't quite identified the location, but that location, when we build it, will be adequate to not only serve park and ride, but perhaps some special events on weekends like farmers markets and other things. We're hoping to put in, and the state is offered, or it says they'll incorporate bus stop into the location, perhaps a yard stop, perhaps some public restrooms, so it makes it a little easier for people to access public transit. State wants to see people accessing public transit so they can ride up easily to Sonora for healthcare or the Employment Development Department, or go to the college. Really kind of create those building blocks for people that are in disadvantaged communities to have an easier access to facilities that improve their life, frankly. We'll probably put in some electric vehicle chargers at that location as well. But kind of moving down the highway just a little bit, we are also going to widen the bridge. That's part of the project that they've agreed to add to the project. The bridge over Woods Creek in Jamestown, just west of Jamestown, where everybody knows it's very narrow through there. It's functionally obsolete. So they're going to widen it out, probably raise it up a bit. They're going to put a separate bridge in is what they're proposing for the bicycle and pedestrians. This will help. The entire project is going to help for evacuations. That's something we've worked with fire, police, and other agencies to identify what are the critical corridors for evacuation should we ever have an emergency that requires evacuations. We've seen them where all of a sudden the highway just gets plugged up. By widening the highway over the bridge, they're going to provide 8-foot shoulders the whole distance. We'll be able to create 2 lanes continuously out of the county should we need to do so in an emergency, with 1 lane coming in for maybe emergency vehicles coming in. Other features of the project are going to be more extensive walkways and ADA improvements in downtown Sonora. They're going to look at the intersection at the high school. It's a 5-legged intersection that's very challenging. We've had some bad accidents there over the years, including pedestrians from the high school.
Sonora High School.
Sonora High School, yeah. And then widening right up 49 ultimately.
Wow.
Just got a big grant to plan all that out.
Yeah. That's some major improvements to that, probably the area where a good portion of the county.
Bless Caltrans, they listen well now. They're a good partner for us. We've got people like Marlon Regisford and Dennis Agar and Gregoria Ponce down in Stockton at District 10. They're great advocates for us. They champion our projects up in Sacramento very well. We give them the information to then take that forward. We give them this information, how we're going to reduce pollution, how we're going to reduce people's dependency on the automobile, how we're going to encourage more transition to electric vehicles. We give them all the data through all of our studies to make it so we're very competitive.
Well, you touched on 2 things I wanted to ask you about. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I heard this term called active transportation. Now, you had probably heard it previous to that, but for me, I heard it about 5 or 6 years ago. And it's kind of sounds like one of those government bureaucrat type of concepts, but it's actually pretty interesting what that means and how we are looking at these projects that take decades to complete. Can you tell me a little bit about what is active transportation and how is it changing the way we look at road improvements and highway expansions?
Well, active transportation, if you build the infrastructure and the environment with those features that accommodate active transportation, that's the person that wants to walk to go to the grocery store, who wants to walk their kids to school, who might ride a bike or even an electric bike, which I think is going to be huge up here in the hilly terrain. Once we provide them a proper facility, you could easily ride an electric bike from Jamestown to Columbia College. It's a 15-mile ride, roughly. Electric bikes can go 40, 50 miles nowadays, no problem. Conquer all those hills easily. But you're pedaling, you're actively part of that transportation mode. And it's something the state is very much encouraging. I mentioned it started out as a $6.5 million project. It looks like it's going to end up about $80 million or more.
Wow.
This is the way the state wants to go with their transportation system. Sometimes the state's priorities don't always align with our core priorities. I know it would be great if the state pumped more money into local road maintenance. I'm sure you hear that all the time.
That's the big conflict, is that we have really good state highway system in California, but when you look at our county roads, when you look at our local roads, they're in very poor shape. And it's not, Tuolumne County, we have pretty rough roads. It's not just Tuolumne County. If you look at any county, they're all pretty bad unless you live in a very wealthy area.
Yeah. We advocate for that all the time. through the legislative process. We support CSAC and the League of Cities efforts to improve funding for local road maintenance. And I know when I talk about this big project that's going to be 85 million or so, people think, man, would that be great to have on our local road system? I agree. It would be great. And it might even be our number one priority. But if the state, they have controls of the purse strings. And if they're not willing to spend it on that, but they're willing to spend it on other things that will also benefit Tuolumne County, it's my job to go out there and maximize those revenues to Tuolumne County and improve what we can.
Yeah. And that's always been the interesting thing to me about TCTC and TCTA is that they're these organizations that are basically built to claw back some of those state tax dollars back into the local community any way you can.
That's right.
And it's something that we wouldn't necessarily be able to do just through public works or just through community development. It's like we need this separate agency where your only job is to claw back the state tax dollars.
Yeah, and I judge my performance on how much money I bring to the community on an annual basis.
Yeah.
And I look at what other rural counties that are similar to our size are bringing in. There are agencies that are solely focused on maintenance and public works type stuff. They're not tapping into these other revenue streams the way we do. And I'm a very competitive individual. It's just the way I'm built, and I like to compete and bring money to the county, and I pride myself on that.
Yeah.
And I have a staff that also, it's small staff. We got 4 support staff. They do an awesome job of also helping me get these funding. And we got consultant teams and whatnot. It's a team effort, and couldn't do it without board support. And all the other letters of support we get around the community. It's a very dynamic and very competitive process to get these funds. And we take a lot of pride in competing well. In fact, we just got $14 million in active transportation program grants in this last cycle. City, county, us, Caltrans, we all joined forces along with public health, and school districts provided support letters, and we do a good job of just banding together and making it happen.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see how the concept of what you do and what these large-scale projects look like is completely different now. It used to be if there was congestion in an area, if you had a bottleneck or a congested corridor, the prevailing wisdom was you add another lane, or you widen the road, or you add another freeway system. And we were building these large highway networks throughout the valley and the Bay Area and LA. And they found that when you built a new interstate, it wouldn't do anything to reduce the amount of traffic. It would get filled up with cars almost immediately. And so what would you say the difference between the concept of reducing congestion and improving the speed at which people can get from point A to point B? How has that changed in the past 20 years?
Well, there's this concept of what they call latent demand, whereby what you said, if you add more lanes so that the traffic flows smoother where you might already have traffic congestion, it's just going to encourage more people to drive their car there. And I think that's a very valid concept in metropolitan areas where your freeway systems are underbuilt for the amount of people that live down there. And it might make more sense for those areas to invest in rail systems or transit systems to give people better other options. And that's kind of been the focus for the Bay Area and LA areas for a while. Still building out some freeways, which are very heavily criticized right now in Sacramento. I think it's a different story in rural areas. In rural areas, we don't have that much population, and we have an underbuilt infrastructure. Many of our roads started out as wagon trails that became 2-lane highways, and they really didn't go beyond that. And we have congestion caused oftentimes not by the locals, but incoming tourist travel. You see it on Highway 49, 108 through Jamestown. On many weekends, yes, we have daily AM, PM peak hours that back up a bit, but man, those Friday afternoons or Sunday afternoons go in the opposite direction, back up a long ways. It's not good for our local economy for people to be frustrated when they come to Tuolumne County. And then you also have to recognize that in an evacuation, those roadways are going to plug up very fast. We've got the studies to prove that.
You got Washington Fire to prove it too.
You got Washington Fire to prove it. So we need to justify. Well, let me back up and say we have studies that have just come out in the last, and they're just finishing up, not just for our county, but rural counties in general, that latent demand is not a true factor in rural areas. And we're proving that to the state. But we also have to prove that we need to build out our infrastructure to a more mature level to handle those evacuations, or we're going to end up with more situations like Paradise. So we are proposing adding additional lane in each direction through the Jamestown area with good proper transitions so people can smoothly flow back in with traffic. We are proposing to move forward with the Greenley Road extension to relieve traffic in downtown, but also provide better evacuation routes and overall circulation. Funneling everybody through one road through a community doesn't make a lot of sense. You really need to have a better connectivity than that.
Yeah. Well, you brought up the Greenley Road extension, so I got to ask you about that. This has been a project that had its origins in, I'm going to say, the late 1970s, early 80s.
It got a big push in the late 1980s.
Okay.
And then died in 1987.
Yeah. So it's come up and it's fizzled and then it's come up again. What are our chances to, within your in my lifetime, to see a Greenley Road bypass?
If the community wants it, I think there's a good chance.
Yeah.
There is a funding pot for it that the state has that we can build most of it on their dime. It's called the Congested Corridor Program. Caltrans has done a congested corridor study, which is a prerequisite to getting that funding for Highway 49 through Sonora. They've identified the Greenley Road extension as not a total solution, but the best solution that we have available. Really, you want to improve multiple roadways around Sonora if you want to solve congestion in downtown Sonora, if it's solvable. But you have to kind of keep in mind it's only going to get worse, the congestion in Sonora, as California population as a whole grows. Not to mention Tuolumne County as a whole will grow some. So we need an alternative route. Where we are is we've done numerous studies since 1987, kind of incrementally to identify that yes, Greenley Road extension is one of several connector routes that we need to build out over some period of time that will ultimately serve the community better, both in terms of reducing congestion and safety evacuations and just better connectivity as a whole. We're moving forward with what we call a project initiation document. And the project initiation document will first meet with property owners out there. We'll get a project team to meet with them to find out what property owner concerns are. That it's clear to me that they feel they weren't listened to properly in prior efforts. We're going to identify environmentally sensitive areas that we need to, because avoidance is the best way of dealing with these things. And after hearing from the community and considering all the factors, we will begin to lay out routes. Of course, we're going to look at the original 1987 route, but we're also going to look at alternative routes in that general corridor and avoid things. There's mining concerns that we need to consider as well. And so we'll look at the different routes. We'll get cost estimates on all that. We'll be very honest. We'll do it with an environmental assessment of what the issues are. I think we will do a economic impact analysis for both downtown Sonora as well as the overall community. We're going to have a lot of oversight from people like yourself, but also we're trying to get people from Sonora Regional Hospital, Sonora Elementary, and perhaps some community members helping with oversight. and ultimately do a very comprehensive document that we can present to the Board of Supervisors, the City Council, and the community at large on the viability of the project, funding options, and the impacts and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be a decision on that will be openly discussed, and whatever decision the community wants that's best for the community, we'll move forward with, or stop the project entirely. I'm kind of thinking it's 50-50 at this point.
Yeah.
Whether it goes forward or not, I will do our very best effort to address all the issues and make sure everybody's questions are answered to the extent possible. And then it's the community decision. And if the community says we want to build it, which personally I think, not seeing all the information, I think that that's probably what as a transportation planner is the right answer. I may change my answer after I've considered everything through these studies, but if the community says we want to do it, I think there's probably a 90% likelihood we can build it.
That's a pretty good likelihood. It just depends on getting the there's so many different interests involved in where that route should be, how it should be structured. Getting all those parts together has been, even going back to the 80s, that's been the challenge. It hasn't been designing it. It hasn't been getting the money, which is unusual. Usually that's the big sticking point, but it's getting all of the different partners together and at least agree on something that's palatable.
Yeah, frankly, I think getting the money will be the easy part. Once we decide we want to do it, if we decide we want to do it.
Yeah.
Speaking of kind of aspects of it, is one of the things I'm actually interested in looking at. Our computer simulation models show that it was originally going to come out up by the towing yard, where you see all the wrecked vehicles stored. We'll look at that, but there's a couple opportunities further down the highway towards, not quite all the way down towards Sonora High School, but there's places where we might be able to connect up further south. And the further south we connect up, the more traffic we take off of downtown Sonora, because it becomes attractive for kids coming from East Sonora to go to the high school and not go through downtown, or people that work in that north side of Sonora but maybe reside somewhere else, or reside in Sonora on the north side and need to get to East Sonora for a job. So the farther south we connect it, the more traffic benefit we have. And we'll look at those things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about, so we talked a lot about the different road projects that we have going on in the community, but the other hat you wear is transit. And so when we talk about transit, we're talking about the bus system, public transportation. There have been enormous changes in the way our state, our country, and our community think about public transportation and what their expectations are. How are you working to meet those? Because we're still kind of left redeveloping a new model based off of the fixed route model, where you had buses stop at certain locations at certain times. And that's just how buses work. That's how most people understood them to work. But that's not really the case anymore, is it?
We've gotten away from that. We had a model where we had about 6 fixed routes that served Jamestown all the way down to Chicken Ranch, Tuolumne. We went up to Sierra Village. We actually went out in the Phoenix Lake Basin. We went out to the college in Columbia. We had a pretty comprehensive system, and at one point we were doing over 500 rides a day. Overlapping that was our dial ride system, which basically dial rides, you call and you reserve a ride. It picks you up at your house and takes you to where you need to go, all within a service area, including all those communities I talked about. And we were doing quite well, but we started to see a decline in ridership, and then COVID hit. When COVID hit, it just wiped us out for ridership. I mean, we got down to like 40 riders a day, which showed that we still had to provide a safety net for people to get their groceries, to get to their health appointments and whatnot. But people were very scared. I mean, when you have the federal government saying don't ride public transit, that's not good for ridership.
Right.
So we've reinvented ourselves. We restored a couple of the routes. The Twinehart, Sierra Village route down to Sonora has been restored. Out to Columbia has been restored. We've actually, in our Route 1, which is our Sonora loop, it does quite well.
That's the trolley route, right?
Yeah, it's the trolley route.
Yeah.
But what we've done, we've eliminated routes to Phoenix Lake Basin, much of the Jamestown area, kind of the lower ridership areas, and we serve those with dial ride that's open to the general public. So if you're in one of those areas, Tuolumne or whatnot, you call, we'll come pick you up at your curb at your house and take you where you need to go. It's still a shared ride system, so we'll be picking up people along the route to take you to your destination. But we've learned that still isn't all that attractive to the public. We need to become more like Uber or Lyft, where you can reserve a ride with an app on your phone. So we're in the process of developing such an app. Should have it done shortly after the first of the year. When we think this will be very popular with young people, particularly. But the convenience is there. That's the challenge with public transit is we just don't have the same level of convenience as owning your own car. We just can't get you there as fast as the shared ride system. You can't just walk out your house, jump in, and go anytime you want. So the convenience is in there, but this will improve the convenience level significantly.
Well, Darin, thank you very much for your time. This has been really interesting. I think I've learned a lot. And please come back anytime.
Thank you. Glad to have it. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Darin. And thank you for joining us. Please join us again next week where we're going to have another interesting conversation about Tuolumne County and all the wonderful things that go on here. Take care.